Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Sports Insight with your host Alamda Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you information about sports from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is at the rate of Indus News Sports. That basically works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, we'll go to the headlines first. And yes, from the world of PSL, Multan Sultans stunned Islamabad United to punch ticket to PSL final, while Peshawar Zomi dethroned Karachi Kings in a high-drama eliminator won on Monday. And yes, from the world of Euro Cup 2020, Denmark registers memorable 4-1 win against Russia to qualify for the R16, while Belgium win against Finland 2-0 in Euro Cup 2020. And yes, from the world of golf, Jack Nicklaus and Gary Player among the players to pay tribute to Jon Rahm after his major victory in the US Open. And yes, from the world of Olympics, Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi picked for the 5th US Olympic women's basketball team. And yes, those were the headlines. And interestingly, we'll start off obviously with Multan Sultan, how they managed to win against Islamabad United, and now they have actually qualified. But not only that, we still have a lot of interesting things happening in the world of PSL. And to discuss the in-depth analysis in terms of PSL, we have with us a cricket expert, Tasneem Samarkhan. Tasneem, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Tasneem, what a match to begin with. Yes, Multan Sultan finally managed to beat Islamabad United, even though Islamabad United, in terms of their performance, they have been super good. They have done so well so far in Abu Dhabi. What's your take on this specific match in which actually managed Multan Sultan to move forward?
I think that it was when Multan had the ability to perform and come together. They had a really tough start to the competition in general, the Pakistan leg, and that continued a little bit over into the UAE as well. But I think that they've gained momentum, and it appears to have happened at the right time for them. They had a tough start to the match with Rizwan departing early. Obviously, he has been such an instrumental figure for Multan Sultans. But, you know, as any good captain could do, he translated a little bit of energy into the side. They were absolutely reinvigorated, and we saw a lot of good performances, particularly with the bowling, which is what Islamabad lost out on. And yeah, and I think they had a very all-round performance, and it was the right time for them to do it.
Right. But even if we go back a few matches earlier, when Islamabad managed to make that interesting 247, breaking all the rules, how do you see that impacting? Obviously, I think Usman Khwaja was a phenomena back then. I think it would surely change his positioning in terms of his cricket team.
Hopefully, it's always nice when you've got talent like Khwaja to see as much of it as possible. Khwaja has performed at the BBL for several years now. He's captained his side very successfully. Right. So I think that he's probably just trying to put his hands up in a T20 year when he knows that the selectors in Australia have a lot to think about. It's probably just reminding people that he has the kind of class and talent that translates across all three formats. And I think that's one of the things about the PSL that is really interesting to watch. It is a World Cup year. So there's not just going to be Pakistanis who are trying to get involved and be seen by their own boards. That's something that maybe Colin Munro would be thinking about as well, having shown himself to be so specialized to batting in the UAE very successfully over the course of the PSL. He's probably thinking about T20 inclusion for the same reason.
Right. And talking about Pakistan leg, if you remember, you know, things were very different in terms of all these teams performing back then, because at that very moment, I remember Karachi Kings and Lahore were pretty much solid in terms of their performance. But I think the UAE chapter kind of changed and opened new ventures for the different teams.
What's interesting about this PSL, obviously it's a shame because it's happened through unfortunate circumstances because of coronavirus. But what's interesting is you really get the opportunity to see how teams, whether or not they can thrive under the most stressful of circumstances. Some of those circumstances are interrupted competitions. It's not easy getting into the swing of something, being told to go home, and then you're supposed to just get back together as a side and carry on momentum months later in a different place.
Right.
And then there's been a loss of players that have probably been too integral to some of the team's setups. There's a lot of players watching across the world. I know Zelmi players and obviously Islamabad United fans and players as well, who would sit there and think, would this be the same results if I didn't have to go home? Or, if players like English bowler Mahmood was there,
Right.
or Tom Banton. And I think that one of the most interesting things about this leg of the tournament has been to see who's got a core side. Now, this matters if you're a Pakistan fan, because probably what you're looking for from the PSL is who can make up a inclusive and very strong, robust Pakistan squad for the T20. And in order to be able to pick a T20 side, you need players that don't perform, every 3 matches in a PSL or have one big score and then never really manage to do it again. You
Right.
need people who are consistently putting their hands up. And it has given us the opportunity to see that. Strip
Right.
away some international stars and which Pakistanis step up to the plate.
Right. That's surely an interesting take. And I hope that, this entire tournament allows us to explore not only for Pakistan team, but I'm sure there are a lot of international players. They want to perform to the point that they can prove it to their own country. I want to talk about, the last match that took place. Karachi Kings losing against Peshawar Zalmi. I think the last over was, the match was overall very nail-biting. Karachi Kings were really trying, but I think the last over was a total disaster in terms of, their catching side. And I still remember Wasim Akram, he was trying to do this, that, what are you guys doing? Why are you not even getting the catches? So I think a big, drawback in terms of fielding. I think Karachi Kings actually fell down for that. Having someone like Babar Azam there to begin with, or Shajil Khan, they had all the momentum and all the pluses and the minuses, but I think they lost it all in terms of the fielding.
I think when Karachi was batting, they actually struggled to really gain momentum. They never accumulated a strike rate that looked terrifying or unattainable. And even Babar Azam's batting, he was playing against some tricky bowlers. He was being safe. He was being careful. He was still playing his shots. But it wasn't at a strike rate that takes a game away from the opponents. So
Right.
for me, it was a little bit of an energy shift, an energy issue. Peshawar Zalmi came on field and they looked hyped. They looked ready to win. They looked incredibly competitive. And it was in every single bowler's run-up. It was in the way that they fielded. It was in the way that they batted as well. That was missing from Karachi. And like you said, Karachi started off the tournament very strong in the Pakistan leg
Right.
of the competition. That was a long time ago now. And if you are a team that thrives on momentum, would you rather get your rush of momentum early, peak early in the tournament, and then maybe like Karachi, not end up making it to the playoffs? Or would you rather have your momentum shift later in the competition, which is what we've watched with Multan Sultans? They've come together as a team, as a unit. Karachi seems to be disintegrating a little bit. And, there's key issues with Karachi, like, is their bowling well-rounded enough? Do they have death bowling that can really compete with serious strike batsmen? I'm not
Right.
entirely sure they were that.
And one team which literally disappointed all was surely Quetta Gladiators. Even when they were in Pakistan, they were not up to the mark they were supposed to be. And even in the leg when it came to Abu Dhabi, they just could not be there wholly solely. And I think in terms of performances, if we look at Sarfraz, he has been really on his aggressive side with regards to his emotions and his anger. And, I think they just, came down tumbling upon each other.
What I think is really interesting is the different ways in which we all characterize Sarfraz and his personality. Because some of us see him as cool, calm, and collected, and some of us see him as a little bit emotional or willing to give in to some of the emotions that he feels on the field. I think he's a little bit of an interesting character because I don't think it matters whether you are a cool, calm, collected Kane Williamson or an emotional character like Sarfraz. I think what matters is that you get the best out of your players.
Right.
I don't think that Quetta's issue has been a failure to get the best out of their players. I think one of the issues is not knowing who their best players are. They've
Right.
had some changes in the last couple of years that have really shaken them up as a side. and what their side's identity is. Shane Watson was a very large component of the success that they've had, and I think when he's not there, you've got a batting hole that is really difficult to fill. And beyond that, you've got a hole in terms of experience that is absolutely massive. That's on-field experience, that's dressing room experience, and it's something that adds up. One thing that I have noticed is the absence of Viv Richards is quite palpable, I would say, amongst the Gladiators players. So I think for them, it has been a case of not quite the right game plan, not quite the right squad.
Right.
They are definitely going to have to look at the draft next year. I think sometimes you just have to go back to the drawing board. You have to look at what made you successful, what made you work, and how you can try and re-attain some of that energy. So for Quetta Gladiators, I think it is a matter of going right back to the beginning, thinking about your draft, thinking about what type of T20 cricket you look to play, and how you will achieve that with the rotation that you have and what you can get. So for Quetta, I think the best thing that can be said for Quetta is they need to go home, forget about this season, and start all over again.
Right. It's all about re-evaluating and reinventing what they were and where they are right now. Interestingly, if you look back into, I want to talk about Peshawar Zalmi. Obviously, in Pakistan, even then, Peshawar Zalmi wasn't at their best, but look at them now. I think if we talk about Zazai to begin with, or Shoaib Malik, all the momentum, they actually managed to get that. And I think someone like Shoaib Malik is that confidence giver to the entire team, because, having such a senior player out there and who's standing there tall, I think it would be a super interesting match to see when Peshawar Zalmi comes up face to face with Islamabad United today.
I think that Zalmi is one of the strongest squads on paper. I think they're very well-rounded. I think they have depth in batting. I think they have depth in experience. You mentioned Shoaib Malik, and you're absolutely right. He is globally one of the most experienced T20 players, and that does account for a lot. He's also been really successful in terms of runs and a decent strike rate. He is close enough to the top of the contenders. And I think that's a really important thing for Peshawar to look at. They know what their strength is. They know where their strengths come from. I think that they will be an exceptionally difficult team for Islamabad to overcome. It's a matter of momentum, and Zalmi is absolutely gaining it. Day by day, they're gaining confidence. They're gaining a comfort in how they each play. I think Wahab Riaz is, if we look statistically, Wahab Riaz is one of the most important death bowlers in T20 cricket over the last 5 or so years in terms of strike rate, in terms of his economy. It's a lot of experience, and I think that is very tough to contend with for Islamabad. Islamabad have stacked themselves with certain types of batsmen and certain types of players. And while I very much enjoy watching it, I don't know if it's necessarily the team that you would bet on, considering what we watched in the last game Islamabad were in. If you are able to neutralize someone like Colin Munro, by bringing the ball back into him, by trying to dismantle him, dislodge him very early in his innings, then that definitely gives Islamabad's opposition the upper hand. That's what happened with Multan Sultan. And I think that's exactly what Zalmi will be looking to do. They have the experience to do it. They have the squad strength to do it. And like you said, they've got the momentum shift behind them as well. I would say that they're probably strong favorites. But the interesting thing about Islamabad United, and we've seen it again and again, they have been one of the strongest teams in the short history of the competition. They have very successfully and very consistently reached the final stages, and they've always put on strong performances. As you mentioned yourself, the 240 some runs that we got to watch the other day, which was absolutely fabulous.
Right.
Islamabad is capable of it, very much capable of it. And if they get the start that they have in their mind, then it's very difficult to come back from that for an opposition. So this is exactly the game plan that Peshawar are going to be going into their match with. And that is neutralize Colin Munro, neutralize Khwaja as early as possible.
Right.
When there's no base for the later batsmen, such as Asif Ali or Brandon King to build upon, or Shadab Khan even, then it's going to be a different game. And it's going to probably end up being something closer to what we watched Multan Sultans do.
Right. Looking forward for an interesting, surprising match, to be very honest, Asim. Thank you so much for being a part of the show, and we'll surely have you once again once we're done with PSL.
Thank you.
Great. So that was pretty much the in-depth analysis of the entire PSL situation right now. But anyways, guys, we'll take a quick break. Once we get back from the break, there is more news coming up your way. See you guys after the break. And welcome back from the break. And yes, before the break, we were discussing the world of PSL. Not to forget that we discuss more sports. That's what we usually do. So we're going to talk more about the world of football. Talking about football, I'm going to talk about Euro Cup 2020. The interesting take is that Denmark actually manages to win against Russia 4-1 to begin with. And not only that, Belgium actually managed to win against Finland 2-0. But to discuss the in-depth analysis, we have with us James Rowe, who is an expert in terms of football. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you once again for having me, Adil. I hope everybody is keeping well.
Yep. Okay, so James, I'm going to start off with the first match that I'm going to discuss is definitely Denmark's victory 4-1 against Russia. And now Russia is at the end of the table. So what's your take on this match to begin with?
First and foremost, delighted for Denmark. I think it represents everything which is good about international football. A small country making progress, written off by many after the terrible events of Christian Eriksen. But they've really become galvanised. They've got very, very good players. They've got a very good manager in Kasper Hjulmand, who's very highly rated. And I think things are starting to turn now for Denmark, and I think they'll be a very feared opponent in the last 16.
Right, and talking about obviously the Group B itself, Denmark now is on the number 2, and obviously Belgium is on number 1. I think now is the situation when we can conclude that Russia is pretty much out of this specific group, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, I think it's highly unlikely they will make it through as one of the best third-placed finishers. But strange things happen in football. I think the real calculations and people getting their calculators out, I think, as the cliche goes, we won't know until the final whistle of the last group games who the 4 best third-placed finishers will be.
Right, and if we talk about Euro 2020 itself, because of the pandemic situation, things have been really difficult for them to manage, because I think this event is actually scheduled after almost 60 years.
It was an initial idea from Michel Platini to have the 60th anniversary spread around different countries, which would have been a noble idea, but also with the situation with the pandemic and the postponement of the tournament for a year, and also the fact of certain teams playing all their games in their home stadiums, like Denmark, like the Netherlands, like Italy. I don't think the other nations, when the idea was first spawned, thought that that was going to be the case.
So James, I really want to know how much this Euro 2020 will be impacting teams' performances in terms of the qualifiers for the World Cup that's due in Qatar 2022.
I think it's a great observation, Adil, first and foremost. I think it's a really great observation. I think you're absolutely right. I think there will be many surprises in the autumn internationals, especially away from home. To give you an example, North Macedonia won in Germany, which nobody expected. And if you go through the groups as well, there are many tough games, especially away from home. For example, England go to Budapest, which I think will be difficult. And I think teams that have played well in these Euros, I think they'll gain an awful lot of confidence going into the World Cup qualifiers.
Right. And if we look back into the initial plan of Euro Cup 2020, so everything was designed in a way that Group A had to majorly take part in the events in Italy. The Group B had to be in Russia, all the events, and not only that, in Denmark as well, in their stadium, and then goes for Netherlands in Group C and England in D. So is it still the same prospect that they initially planned because of the pandemic situation, or has it changed in terms of scheduling for the stadiums?
I think it has changed. We originally saw that Bilbao was due to host the games in Spain. It's actually Seville that's hosting. Teams who had their initial bids rejected on the grounds that the stadium wasn't ready. Right. So I think with the idea at the conception, I think it's changed enormously. I think it's a noble idea as a one-off, but I think in future it's best to return to the format of one country, one host, as of Germany again in 2024.
Right. And I would also want to talk about, as we're discussing this group in specific, I would surely also want to talk about, obviously, Finland. Obviously, they are at the number 3 right now because Belgium managed to win against them 2-0. So what's your take on this particular match as well?
Very interesting of Belgium, a fantastic finish from Romelu Lukaku. Makes me feel very old because I saw him debut for Anderlecht against Ajax in 2009, and you can tell even then he was going to be an amazing footballer. But I think there's great collective togetherness with Belgium, and I don't think they're going to win it. I think they'll make the latter stages. But a great header last night from Thomas Vermaelen, who appears to be a somewhat forgotten man of Belgium, but a tremendous header. It went down as an own goal, but I think the power of the header really ensured that the keeper was going to find it very difficult to keep that ball out of the net.
Right. I would also want to inquire in terms of Belgium's victory. I'd also want to know, this means that England, Czech Republic, Sweden, France, they have guaranteed progress to the next stage.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think, as I say, when all the games are finished, we will know who is playing who. I think to speculate now would be a little bit strange. I think there are certain countries pinning their hopes. Right. And suggesting what could happen in the best route. But in tournament football, it doesn't work like that. If you want to win it, you've got to beat the best. And the most important thing is that you qualify, and there'll be many different permutations. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Right. And talking about the groups, I would also want to talk about one particular group, which is Group F, which has France, Germany, Portugal, and Hungary. So how do you see this group developing? Because I think it's one of the most solid groups that I see. And not only that, in fact, there's another group, obviously, Czech Republic, England, Croatia, and Scotland. I think two tough groups out there.
Absolutely. I think the group of France, Portugal, and Germany and Hungary, I think that one will be decided in the last minute. Right. I think people being disingenuous to Hungary, particularly the French media after their draw, right. I think that's a little bit unfair. I think it was always apparent that Hungary were not going to lose every single game in that home stadium with the crowd behind them, and they've also got some very good players. I think the game against Germany and France against Portugal, I think that group will be settled when the final whistles blow on both games.
Well, we're hoping for the best for Hungary as well. And surely, thank you so much, James, for being a part of the show and discussing the Euro 2020 with us.
You're more than welcome. I look forward to next time.
Great. So yes, that was, and he definitely gave us the in-depth analysis of the Euro 2020 and how, things were planned before and things had to change because of the pandemic situation. But we've talked about a few groups as well, and not only groups, we have also talked about the victory of Denmark over Russia 4-1 that we discussed, and Belgium's victory 2-1 over Finland. Anyways, this was from the world of football. I'd quickly jump open to the world of golf. Yes, as we know, Jon Rahm finally managed to get that US Open title, and I think it's been a phenomenal performance by him because of the fact that, if you remember, he was at the Memorial and he was at the verge of making it through because he was leading it. But at the third round, he was asked not to participate because he was tested positive for corona, and he was really, really upset about it. And he literally broke down into emotions, but he went back, he prepared himself, he got himself cured, and he came out there in the US Open and managed to get his first Grand Slam victory. And that only allowed him, and it was pretty much more like his Father's Day gift because his father was there, his family was there, and I think he surely got lucky. And in this case, I'm going to talk about Nicholas and Gary Player are the players who want to pay tribute to Jon Rahm. Why? Because if you look back into his struggle, I think this 26-year-old has come a very long way. And now slowly and gradually, if we talk about Jon Rahm, he has finally come up to a point of managing his emotions, which surely was a technical thing. And not to forget that Torrey Pines, as discussed in the last show, was the same spot where he proposed his wife. So I think it was a lucky charm for him, and we wish him all the very best ahead. And yes, I think he is someone out there who surely deserves a tribute. Anyways, this was, the US golf side. I'll switch over instantly to the world of Olympics. Yes, still a lot of stories in terms of the world of Olympics. Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi picked for the 5th US Olympic basketball team. And Sue Bird is bidding to become the first 5-time Olympic gold medalist. The duo were selected for the 5th Olympics, and not to forget that it's the same Olympics that there are still so many speculations. A lot of people do not want that to happen, but Tokyo has finally managed that they'll still run up with the show. They're still trying to discuss the amount of spectators because of the coronavirus pandemic. A lot of teams are still saying that the event should not be happening, but there's a definite go ahead. So I think things are slowly and gradually getting there. Anyways, guys, this was pretty much it from the world of sport. If you want to reach out to us, you can on our social media handle, which is @Indus New Sports. Till then, take good care of yourselves, and bye-bye.